Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to this, our first meeting of Eastern Area Planning Committee in our newly refurbished council chamber. I'm Councillor Graham Pass, Chairman of Committee. Other members of the committee present are Councillors Cottam, Law, Linden, Macro, Mays, Somner, Williamson and Woodhams. The following officers are also in attendance to advise and support the meeting. Emma Nucci, our Principal Planning Officer. Sarah Weaver, a Senior Planning Officer, here to provide take us through the first item on the agenda. Gareth Dowding on Zoom for a Principal Engineer, Traffic and Road Safety. Sharon Armour, our Senior Solicitor, primarily to keep me on the straight and narrow, but all of us as well. Sadie Owen, our Democratic Services Officer. Ben Ryan, Democratic Services, and last but by no means least, our Zoom host, Tom Dunn. Before we start proceedings, I'd like to explain for the members of the public who may be watching that tonight's meeting is being held both over Zoom and with councillors present in the meeting room. Although there are no longer any formal restrictions regarding COVID, the council is continuing to adhere to safe working arrangements. Colleagues should continue to use the cleaning materials provided to clean the desk, as this will help reduce the risk. The meeting is also being live streamed on YouTube, so members of the public are able to follow proceedings. Please may I ask everyone present in the meeting area to make sure they switch on their microphones when invited to speak directly into the microphone, to switch them off when finished. And I think we have all checked that the sound is turned off everyone's tablets. And if you could have your phones on silent, I'd be grateful. If you hear the evacuation alarm this evening, you must leave the building immediately. Please proceed via the safe emergency exit route, which will be shown to us by the trained officers present. Please follow any instructions given by those officers. The assembly points in the car park of the Dolphin Pub. Anyone requiring assistance to get there will be assisted accordingly by our trained officers. If the lockdown alarm sounds, we will remain seated in the chamber and await instructions. We will adjourn the meeting until such time it is safe to proceed. Do members have any questions about the way in which this meeting will be conducted before we go? I see no hands. First of all, item 1, do we have any apologies, please?
Yes, we do. Councillor Cottam sends his apologies and Councillor McKinnon, but we have Councillor Williamson substituting for Councillor McKinnon tonight.
Thank you very much. Members, minutes. We have 2 lots of minutes. The first one, the annual meeting held on the 10th of May, a very simple one. May I have a proposer and a seconder? I see 2 hands, Councillors Law and Woodhams. May I sign them? Any questions? No. And much longer, the meeting held on the 11th of May. Councillor Linden?
Yes, on page 31, the top paragraph. Could you use your microphone? Oh, sorry. Yeah. So on page 31, it's just a minor one on top paragraph. I've got would cause a problem in Thatcham and or Woolhampton. I just wanted deleting /or because I think I said Thatcham and Woolhampton, Chairman.
All right. A very minor point. A very minor point. Just thought I'd let you know. Thank you. Any other comments, or may I have a proposer and a seconder? Councillor Law. And Councillor Woodhams again, thank you very much.
Chairman,
yes, Councillor.
May I just make a comment? They're very comprehensive minutes.
They are.
It was a very comprehensive meeting and review, I think. And I'm not sure who took the minutes, but whoever did, I'd like to compliment.
That's very kind of you, and I do agree. They are superb minutes, are they not? Yeah. Well, I'm sure our message will get through. I would imagine it was indeed Jessica Bayliss. I'll check and let her know. Members, declarations of interest. I'll start by saying I do know the 2 people who are objecting to the first item and have known them since I represented Bradfield quite a long time ago. I don't consider it to be a prejudicial interest, so I shall remain in the chair. Councillor Somner.
Thank you, Chairman. Applications 2, 3 and 4, as portfolio holder for planning, transport and countryside, this does fall within the remit of my portfolio. However, I have not been instrumental in the planning and the decision-making process to date. Therefore, I will carry on as normal, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Woodhams.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm declaring an interest on item 2, land north of Bowling Green Road, as I'm an adjacent ward member and I live close to Bowling Green Road. Thank you.
Right, thank you indeed. Anyone else?
Sorry, can I just clarify? Is that just a personal interest, not a prejudicial interest? Yeah.
I don't know what interest it is, but I'm declaring the interest.
I think it's a personal one.
Probably a personal one.
Okay.
Okay, in that case, without further ado, we'll turn to the first application, which is St Andrew's School, 2200193. And may I start by saying again, I know apologies have been made, that this item is carried over from the last meeting. So may I apologise to all those who waited patiently for best part of 3.5 hours or more, only to find this item delayed to this week. I know official apologies were sent out, but I felt important to say that. So, Mrs. Weaver, may I ask you please to introduce the report?
Thank you, Chairman. Hopefully everyone can now see the shared screen, which has the presentation on. The application before members this evening is for the installation of a containerised biomass boiler system. The application is before members this evening as it has received over 10 representations from third parties objecting to the proposal scheme and is recommended for conditional approval by officers. The site is located outside of a defined settlement boundary. The policy relevance here is ADP1. It is allocated within the open countryside. The site is also within the North Wessex Downs AONB. The proposed biomass boiler system is within the grounds of St Andrews, a public school for children aged 3 to 13. The main school building is approximately 81 metres to the southwest of the site and is Grade 2 listed. The LPA's Conservation Officer has raised no objections to the proposal scheme, and the proposal scheme is not assessed as impacting the listed building. The location of the biomass boiler system is within the large context of St Andrew's School is to the west of the grounds. The site is currently hard standing adjacent to a car parking area and a neighbouring access. The development itself is 2 flat roof containers which are proposed to be clad in timber. There will be 2 chimneys measuring approximately 3 metres above the roof of the containers. The combined width of the 2 containers is approximately 5 metres and they're 6.3 metres long. Excluding the chimneys, the containers are approximately 2.6 metres tall. Third-party concerns have been raised regarding potential air pollution. The Environmental Health Officer has stated that the biomass boiler will efficiently burn and clean the wood pellets and that it will have a minimal impact on the air quality. The full response from the Environmental Health Officer can be found on the Council's planning webpage and in the table just under paragraph 4.1 of this evening's committee report. The Environmental Health Officer has also found that the proposal will not harm neighbouring amenities as regards to noise, which is also a concern raised by third parties. Further details are provided at paragraphs 6.13 to 6.18 of this evening's report. The section of the underground works have been submitted by the applicant. As members may be able to see, this does include an electrical cable. The extent of this electrical cable was shown on the earlier block plan in yellow, which you can go back to if needed. To the west of the site, the adjacent neighbouring access is a number of trees. The LPA's tree officer has raised no objections to the proposal scheme, subject to a planning condition requiring an arboricultural method statement prior to work starting on site. This photograph is looking northeast towards the listed building. As members can see here and from the site visit, the proposal scheme will have very limited impact on the listed building. It can't actually be seen in this photo. As members are aware, the site is located within the open countryside and the AONB. As such, the site is restricted in terms of what development can be approved in this location. Core Strategy Policy ADPP1 does allow for limited development addressing an identified need. It is officers' view that this proposal scheme complies with this criteria. Design policies CS14 and CS19, along with the MPPF, place significant weight on the design and protection of the AONB. The case officer has assessed the proposal scheme against the relevant criteria of these policies. As per paragraphs 6.6 to 6.12 of this evening's committee report, the proposal scheme has been found as compliant with policies CS14 and CS19. Sorry, I'll just go back to the final one. The proposal scheme received significant weight when balanced against assessing policy CS15, which seeks to reduce carbon emission and promote sustainable development. Policy CS10 also weighs in favour of the proposal, as it will help to support an existing rural business. The sustainability and sustainable development also it's also prioritised in the MPPF. The officer's recommendation for the proposal scheme is conditional approval. Thank you.
Chairman, this map is for the next application.
Well spotted, Councillor Linden.
I'll just come out and share it.
And so is that. That's fine. We weren't misled by it though. Now we have two objectors wishing to speak. They're appearing on Zoom, Dr. Hayden Taylor and Miss Culling. Could I please be advised when they are in the room, so to speak, please, Tom?
They're in the room now, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Dr. Hayden Taylor, can you hear us? Dr. Hayden Taylor, I hope you're with us. Can you hear us? Can you acknowledge? He has his hand up.
He's also muted.
I'm here.
Oh, you're there. Yes, we hear you. You're unmuted now.
It wouldn't let me unmute, but it's now unmuted me. I beg your pardon.
We can't see you, but we can hear you. Is
Oh.
Miss Culling with you?
Yes, Miss Culling is sitting beside me.
Are you able to put your video on? It's normally
Yeah.
in the
Oh, start. Yep, there we go. Hang on, another one. There it goes.
wonderful.
There you
I
are.
heard you both, and I trust you can hear us all right.
Perfectly. Thank you.
Right. Now you have up to 5 minutes to share. Can I assist you with any timekeeping?
Possibly. And nudge halfway through.
Nudge halfway through, and I'll give you a minute to go as well.
Right.
You have up to 5 minutes, and your time starts when you speak.
Okay. Well, good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I own Cullinghood and Heron's Farm, and I must start by saying I have absolutely no objection to the school having a biomass, but I'm objecting to the site that they're putting it on. This site is 150 metres from my home and gardens, and the polluted particles will land on my garden, the B&B accommodation, the stable yards and fields. The fumes and particles are dangerous to human health, and I don't want this to reduce my lifespan, please. We have many livery owners and visitors to the farm, plus many wedding guests and B&B visitors. A portion of the wedding guests are old and some have health issues. During the summer months, wedding guests are always in the garden. I telephoned XL Planning and they told me they'd sited the biomass next to the swimming pool and close to my boundaries. They said the fumes would be carried out over open farmland. This simply isn't true. The fumes will be carried in a southwesterly direction, which is over my home, gardens, stables and fields. May I please ask the Planning Committee to obtain a full risk assessment from St Andrew's School and the manufacturer covering particles which will blow over my property, and also the AstroTurf where children play games. My second concern is possible noise from the burner. I sent an email to the bursar to ask about the noise. She didn't answer, so I translated this, that it could be noisy. Again, I asked for a risk assessment, please, on the effect it may have on horses. I telephoned the manufacturer to ask about noise and was told that it was quiet except for an intermittent whooshing sound. And that's my point. Horses are flight animals. They become accustomed to their surroundings, and unusual sounds cause them to spook. This generally means the horse moves very sharply away from the sound and may attempt to gallop away from the sound. This might also result in the leader being trampled and the horse free to escape. If the horse is ridden, it would do much the same thing. It would whiz away from the noise, which may unseat the rider, which in turn could result in a possible injury or the air ambulance.
Off time.
Okay, a loose horse.
That's half time.
Okay. My third concern is for the lime trees. I understand the heat will kill them within 3 to 5 years. Again, I'd like a risk assessment on the lime trees. This would also kill wild birds and various other things. Thank you very much for listening.
And if I may hop in, because I'm conscious we've only got a few minutes. Basically, the exhaust gases from the chimney are at 850 Celsius, or ranging between 650 to 850 Celsius. And because of the height of the trees, the exhausts will actually go straight into the canopy of those lime trees. Those lime trees were planted in about 1880. They are still there today. There's about 68 of them. And according to Kew, they have actually said that this intensity of heat continuously will, without doubt, damage and kill the trees. That's the first instance. Secondly, there is, whilst I agree that potentially as a profit motive, changing from oil to wood is fair enough, but they can potentially relocate this facility to the very far east of the property, of their property, which would be about 380 meters to the east. That would actually then, the exhaust gases would then blow over completely open farmland and not over the conurbation. And one final point is that because this facility generates steam, steam travels at 600 meters per second at an atmosphere of 3 bar or 3 atmospheres. And as a consequence, locating the plant to the east, 380 meters away, rather than 85 meters, would actually not detract upon the efficiency of the plant, but would actually then protect us who are to the northwest, where we are only 140 meters away from the chimney. So and obviously I've got COPD, various others I know have COPD and bronchial issues and asthma. All of those things are going to be exacerbated. And as the City of London has said,
can you draw to your conclusions, please?
Yeah, but just that we do object on grounds that where it's located, if it could be located 380 meters to the east, that would therefore be tolerable, and it would be obviously would not impact upon the health or upon the business, which is a vibrant business of Heron's Farm, which at the moment will be impacted negatively. We're already suffering from 400 vehicle movements.
I have to stop you. You have gone a few seconds over, but thank you very much indeed. Please remain there for any questions members may have for you. Members.
Thank you.
Councillor Linden.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a brief point, Dr. Hayden-Taylor. What is COPD, please?
It's chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, which is an incurable lung disease that is something, some minors get it, other people do it. Smokers who, I smoked about 40 years ago. There's quite a number of people who have COPD, and it can be it effectively, it's a incurable lung disease, which means that effectively you cannot absorb the same level of oxygen into your blood. So instead of being 98% blood oxygen, you're probably around about 90 or even going below that. And this asthma, anyone with asthma and anyone with COPD will be very negatively impacted by these fumes. And that's in accordance with a report that's been produced by Oxford University, Cambridge University, Greenpeace, the City of London, who also say that 31% of all air pollution in the City of London is attributed to either wood pellet burning or log burning.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor.
Okay,
I'm sorry to hear that. Thank you.
Councillor Law.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Mainly the question, I think, is for Ms. Cully. Ms. Cully, have you looked at page 46 on the officer's report, where in West Berkshire Environmental Health have stated that being monitored 24/7 and with regular maintenance in place, this proposal will have minimal effect on air quality and is in fact exempt from regulation under the Clean Air Act due to its efficiency. I note you asked for an environmental impact review.
Yes.
How do you reconcile that with what, I mean, the people who would do that impact review are West Berkshire's Environmental Health, and they've already said this is exempt. Can you comment? I don't really understand why.
Can I say I've not actually seen that report, but I know that these particles are carcinogenic. They will land on my garden, I will be breathing it in, and it will shorten my life. And people that have respiratory problems, it will impact them very, very much.
Well, I understand your concerns. I just have to be guided by the specialists and the specialists here from Environmental Health.
What I would like from you then is a risk assessment from the biomass site to my house to absolutely assure me that there will be no particles at all or no fumes on my property. When I spoke to the company initially, they said they sited it there so that all the fumes would go out over open farmland. That's not the case. It comes directly to me.
Right.
And I want to live a long time.
Don't we all? Right. Councillors, any other questions, please, to the objectors? I'm looking for Zoom hands. 2, I see none. Right, thank you very much. I'm sure the applicant will be questioned too on the points that you raised. Thank you very much. Members, we now come to the applicants. If you could please advise me, Tom, when Ed Graham, the head teacher or headmaster, Penny Franklin, the bursar, and the applicant, who is Stuart Reed from Clean Energy, are in the room, please.
They're all in the room now, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Graham, Ms. Franklin, Mr. Reed. Can you all hear us?
I can indeed, Chairman.
You can. Mr. Reed, we now see you, and yes, you're unmuted. And Ms. Franklin, can we see you as well?
Yes, hold on, I just need to press the right button.
Yeah. Well done. Thank you. Wonderful. Right. You have up to 5 minutes to share. How you wish to divide the time is up to you, but can I assist you with any timekeeping?
Perhaps you might count, Chairman, but I think we should be fine. Thank you.
Well, I'll tell you when you've got a minute to go and give you a clue then. Perfect. So time starts when you speak.
Lovely. Thank you. Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you for allowing us to join. The school obviously has a sustainability plan to reduce our overall impact in terms of carbon emissions from school activities. Currently, we use oil and LPG to provide heat and hot water for our larger buildings across the school site. Our proposal being considered here is to reduce our reliance on fossil fuels by installing renewable energy technology in the form of a biomass boiler system. This will replace our use of oil and significantly reduce our reliance on gas. The effect of this is to reduce our net carbon emissions from heating alone by circa 151 tonnes per year. In addition, there is a net reduction in vehicle movements to the school site, given we plan not to be taking deliveries of oil, which further reduces our carbon emissions and will benefit the local area. This will amount to a reduction of approximately 40 lorry journeys each year. We would plan for our pupils to use the biomass boiler and its sustainable wood pellet fuel in their science and sustainability projects, which will give them a real-life insight into carbon reduction technologies and how we can all contribute to UK net zero ambitions. This is all starting on our doorstep. We understand not everyone likes change, and we would welcome our neighbours to come and visit the plant when it's up and running, of course, subject to the council approving the application this evening. We're very happy to respond to any questions the committee may have, and I'll pass over to Stuart Reid. Stuart, if you have anything to add there.
Thank you, Ed. Good evening, everybody, and thank you for giving us this opportunity to speak. I've been working in the field of biomass heating for 15 years, during which time I've been involved in around 400 projects of a similar size and scale to this. Many I counted before the session, and I think over 45 of them are in schools. We've also undertaken other projects in hotels, wedding venues, etc. And interesting, this is the first time I've ever been required to come to a planning committee. So it's a new experience for me. Hopefully, the application itself and the subsequent correspondence that we've shared has addressed many of the concerns that have been raised. Obviously, we don't take these concerns lightly, but my view is that the planning officers in their assessment have taken these issues into consideration. I'm happy to add sort of any further technical information or answer any questions as required. To put this into some form of context, I think it's important to understand the distinction between a wood-burning stove, perhaps, which obviously burns logs of varying fuel quality and varying moisture content, and some of the impacts that has when there's thousands of them installed, for example, within London, to this type of automated wood pellet boiler. So these boilers tightly control their emissions. They're Clean Air Act exempt, as has been mentioned earlier, which effectively means that there's no visible smoke or only very rarely visible smoke. And emissions have to comply with a legislative standard to meet the RHI Renewable Heat Incentive criteria. So the emissions are very low, and that's what's been assessed as part of the application by the planning officers. Without kind of going into the full response to some of the issues that have been raised, there were a couple of things that it's probably worth highlighting. The first is that the emissions temperature in the flue gas isn't 800 degrees; it's more like 100 and 120. So the flue gases are recirculated. The flue gases are recirculated within the boiler to kind of maximise the combustion efficiency. So I think some of the facts and figures that are perhaps causing concern are just maybe a misunderstanding of what the boiler is actually doing and how it behaves. So we don't have the 800 degrees, and just to clarify, there's no steam at all involved in this system. It's simply hot water. So the idea of moving it further away just means that there's additional costs and additional pumping costs and so on. This is not a steam raising system. So I think perhaps some of the issues or concerns that have been raised are based on not a full understanding of the technology and how it works. But I'm happy to go into that in more detail as required.
Well, that's perfectly timed with 1 second to go. So I'm sorry, Ms. Franklin, but you are there to answer any questions if members have them. I have two hands up. Councillor Linden.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Graham and Mr. Reid. Mr. Reid, just to go further on to the objections area, I mean, I've visited the heat and energy plant in, I think it's Viola's plant in north of Basingstoke. So I understand there are very strict controls, and would your emissions coming up be on public record at all, and can you further answer any of the concerns from Mr. Hayden Taylor and Miss Culling to satisfy us that our environment officers are just to confirm their views.
So my understanding is that we as part of these projects, there's an emission certificate associated with each individual biomass boiler. So that information is publicly available, and it's that information that gets factored into the consideration around whether these types of project do not have any pose any risk to human health or have adverse impacts on air quality. So my understanding is that's been taken into account in the recommendation to approve the project.
Thank you very much, Jim.
Thank you, Councillor Law.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. It's a question for Mr. Reid, although I do think he's probably partly or maybe even wholly already answered it in his presentation. It's to do with why the biomass boiler was sited exactly where it was, given that the two objectors said we'd be happy with it 300 metres to the east. I think he's saying it's a matter of costs plumbing. But let me ask you that question, Mr. Reid. Why is it there where it is and not somewhere else, say further east?
Yeah, obviously cost is an issue. So as you saw as part in one of the charts associated with the application or one of the layout drawings, we've got an underground network of pipes connecting the main heat demand buildings on the campus. So there is an element of cost in the sense that the further we make those pipes, the more capital expenditure there is, which increases the cost of the heat and the project to the school, and therefore makes it less viable, which ends up with nobody doing projects and therefore no carbon saving being achieved from these types of things. So the cost is always an issue, but equally steam, one of the comments made was correct in the sense that steam does travel very, very quick and very freely, whereas hot water, which is what this is, it requires, you lose heat the further the distance you go, so you do actually start to impact the efficiency, and you also have an increased cost associated with pumping that water. So I think there's a number of reasons that would mean that if we had to take the project further away or change the location, it would probably, I think it would become unviable.
Be happy with that. Thank you, Councillor Law. Councillor Macro.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a couple of questions, actually. First of all,
sorry, it didn't sound like you were using the microphone. Thank you.
Oh, I've moved it closer. Yes, I have a couple of questions. One is that you mentioned there's great reduction in heavy vehicle movements in respect to delivery of the wood chips versus the oil. I wondered how that was achieved, especially as I would have thought that wood chips had a much lower energy density than oil. And the other thing is the objectors are concerned about the effect of noise on horses, and I wondered if you could reassure us on the noise aspect. Thank you.
Yeah, again, maybe if I take them in the first place, Ed, and you can, Penny, you can jump in if required. So in terms of the vehicle movements, I think you're absolutely correct. So biomass fuel does have a lower energy density than oil. I think the distinction is that what tends to happen with oil deliveries is that they're done on almost like a milk round basis. So it tends to be topped up regular and often with the lorry going around multiple sites and putting 1,000 or a couple of thousand litres in at a go. Whereas what we'd be doing with this project is we'd be coming with a full lorry and putting it all into the silo. So therefore, there's an overall reduction in vehicle movements because we're not having to come every week in the same way that the oil lorries tend to do. So hopefully that addresses the vehicle movement point. It does seem counterintuitive, but I think it's a function of the behaviour of the lorries rather than the energy density of the fuel. In relation to noise, I mean, again, we submitted some noise information as part of the application. I I can only say again, so I think that there will be limited noise observable out with the boundary area. Again, I've been involved with numerous projects and farms and country estates over the years where these plant rooms are built adjacent to houses in the first place. So, literal extensions of people's houses and don't cause any noise concerns. And equally within a farm environment, I've never known one to cause any noise that has spooked an animal. And I don't say that lightly because I've got quite a lot of personal experience of horses and their behaviour. So I do understand the motivation for the concern raised. But yeah, anecdotally, I wouldn't. It's not a concern I would share.
Councillor Mays.
Thank you, Chairman. This is for Mr. Reid. Mr. Reid, the pipeline that you have shown in the drawings, or that's been shown, is that insulated? It's given a trade name. I don't recognise it.
Yes.
Or is it a plastic or what?
It's underground, so it's pre-insulated plastic pipe, basically. So it comes encased with, you've got what you call the carrier pipe, and then it comes encased and encircled in insulation, and that's designed obviously to minimise the heat loss associated with the underground pipe.
Sorry, and these pipes are carrying water, which is heated. Is that correct?
Exactly. So plastic
tends the swimming pool as well as the main school buildings, I understand.
Yes, that's right.
So really where it is in the system isn't really relevant as far as heat loss is concerned, is it? If you want to cover all those length of buildings.
I think the logic of siting where we have is that we've tried to find a spot that is the most practical for providing heat to both buildings.
Okay, fine. That's fine. On another point, with regard to the actual volume of chips in store, that's one container. Is that correct?
Yes.
And is that? I mean, how do you actually fill it? Is it done with? Is it blown in or kept in?
It's blown in. Because these are pellets, they tend to flow quite well. It's a bit like animal feed. I don't know if anyone's ever seen that. So they're blown in.
Fine. Would you normally empty the container before you bring the next load in?
Yeah. Practically what you're trying to do is you want to be able to accommodate a full lorry load.
Yeah.
Equally, you don't want the thing to run empty because then the school has to revert to burning oil. So you're trying to keep it, you take it down to the point where a full lorry load can come back in.
Is one lorry load equivalent to a part of the container or just?
Yes, it's a part of it. So yeah.
Well, how much of the total is one lorry load?
I think what we're anticipating is about 16 tons. Is the full is the volume of the container, and we can take 8-ton loads.
Okay, so it's about half,
give or take. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. That's good.
Well, there are no other hands, but I'm going to ask a question that no one else has. There was some disparity between the temperature of the, I'll call it exhaust, the top of the chimney. You said it was significantly lower because the heat is recycled. But it puzzled me on site that you had cited these burners, this system, underneath some very mature trees. Have you done any work to see how those trees could be impacted by what will be, I would imagine, a fairly constant source of heat, however hot that heat is?
we've not done any specific evaluation in this project. It is something that we've done in the past in other projects where actually the flue, the exhaust has tended to be a bit closer to the trees, but the kind of under the canopy, if you like. So again, in general, the temperatures. So what's happening is the combustion process is taking place at about 800 degrees, and obviously what you're trying to do is capture as much of that heat as possible to warm the water. So really the flue, the gases that are exiting the flue are the lowest possible temperature before they start to condense. Because if they condense, you don't get the appropriate sort of dispersal, and they won't go up the chimney. So it's really a similar, the flue gas temperatures are going to be similar to a non-condensing oil boiler, which is what the school have got in at the moment. So the flue gas temperature in and of itself is not really any different with biomass compared to oil or any other combustion boiler in these types of commercial properties. Obviously, a condensing gas boiler in a house works slightly differently, but not at this what you would typically have in a school. So I don't particularly think it's an area where with the proximity and the temperatures that actually requires further assessment.
Right, thank you. Members, any other questions? The parish council initially had some comments. Those comments, I think, were addressed by the applicant and through the process and by our officers. Councillor McKinnon, the ward member, can't be with us due to work commitments. So we come straight to any questions for our officers. Members. Councillor Law.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I want to ask some questions about the conditions attached.
Okay.
And because I'll be very clear up front, the objectives are talking about pollution, noise, HTV units, and the objections seem to cover this, particularly the pollution and the front noise. Given the fact that the condition for service and maintenance, units need to be regularly serviced and maintained to ensure an efficient mechanical function, and ensured by environmental health. If it's an efficient mechanical function, there's no fear for pollution. In fact, it will even be assessment. So my first question is, how are we going to monitor this condition? My next question is the same question, but it relates to plant noise, because here again, we're talking about that the plant noise will be minimal, below certain decibels, etc. And it's the condition is that this plant shall not exceed. Now, who is going to be measuring this on a regular basis? Those are my two questions.
Right. Mrs. Weaver, can you answer those, please?
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Councillor. I'll certainly try my best. The conditions will function in the same that any planning condition would function. Whilst it's not my report, but we'll say it's a very diligent report on behalf of my colleague. The conditions do pass the tests as required by the MPPF. They are reasonable, enforceable, and the other points which have fallen out of my head, I'm afraid. But they have been assessed and reviewed. If it was something that members were concerned about, perhaps the condition could be amended and it was agreeable to the applicants, that perhaps a yearly report or something along those lines might suffice.
I actually think that's a good idea, but I still come back and ask the question, the yearly report would be made to whom?
The council, which reviewed by the environmental health officer.
It would be to the environmental health, but both of them, noise and pollution, I think, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, maybe we can come to that when we come to make our recommendations.
Well, I'm sure that'll be a good debating point. I mean, we did have a similar thing, did we not? Where, if you recall, a couple of meetings ago, where a log had to be kept that could be inspected. And I'm sure a school such as this would be diligent in keeping maintenance records, but I'm sure we can enter debate. Any other questions for our officers before I ask someone to start the debate? I see no more hands. Who's going to start then, please? Well,
We still
carry
hold the
on,
meeting,
Councillor
but
Law.
it's along the lines of just
Okay.
my little bit of a preamble for the officer's question. I mean, you look at this, it's there were three real objections: pollution, air pollution, noise, and excessive HGV movements. Now, we were told that by the headmaster, in fact, that the HGV visits, because we're moving from oil to pellets, will be reduced by about 40 every year. So, in my opinion, that objection goes away. The noise and the pollution, we're told, will be managed by conditions, and therefore those are addressed. I would therefore like to propose officers' recommendations with a slight change to conditions 4 and 5, that there be an annual report provided to environmental health in West Berkshire on those two conditions, 4 and 5, noise and pollution.
Okay, well, thank you, Councillor Law. I'm obliged, of course, now you made a proposal to ask for a seconder, but you're seconded, Councillor Williamson. I would not foreshorten debate. Does anyone wish to contribute? Otherwise, I'll go to Councillor Williamson to ask for him. I'm looking around for physical and Zoom hands. I see none. Councillor Williamson, do you wish to make further comment?
No, Chairman, I'm happy to second that. And I think also in line with the council strategy with regard to the environmental impact and the climate emergency, I think this is a really positive step forward and should be encouraged.
Final call for any other members to make any contribution. Right, I'll take the vote, please. Oh, Councillor Mays, you have. Yeah. I didn't notice that just now. My apologies. I see you through that gap there, but Councillor Mays.
Yeah, sorry. Can we also add to the data that we're going to ask to be recorded is actually the number of lorry loads that are actually coming in compared with the number of oil loads that we would have normally had in the past? Can we actually count the number of pellet lorries? Because I don't think we really know. If the energy per unit of weight is less with the pellets than it is with the oil, then I would have thought there would be more.
Can I ask Mrs. Weaver if she can make a comment on that? Otherwise, I'll ask Mr. Dowding, who is our highways engineer, if he could assist us.
Oh, my apologies. I was just taking advice from a colleague. Very sorry.
Okay,
could you repeat the question? I'm so sorry.
Basically, it was, well, go on, Councillor Mays.
If the energy in the wood pellets per tonne of a weight is less than the weight of 1 tonne of oil, then I would have thought there would be more pellets coming in. So I'm asking for the number of pellet lorry loads to be counted and reported.
I don't know that that could be monitored. I don't think that it could be conditioned. Perhaps Gareth Dowding could help me out on this one, but I did speak with Paul Goddard earlier today, and he did confirm that it would be a reduction in
the numbers.
Lorries. Yes.
Chairman, I'm being asked to amend my proposal, so can I comment?
Yes, you may comment, Councillor Law, because you indeed did make the proposal.
Yeah, I think I understand where my colleague here is coming from, but I disagree with him. We've got the headmaster was very clear. He made it very clear in presentation there would be a net reduction of 40 HGV journeys. Now, that may be because the pellet HGVs are longer and heavier than the others, but nevertheless, 40 less reduction. And I don't think it's worthwhile going to all the trouble to count and to monitor, just to ensure a very debatable point. So I would not wish to add that to my proposal.
Councillor Williamson.
Yeah, just to try and assist, if I may. I think if the actual point that was made was the reduction in the lorries is because the oil is done on a milk round. Yeah. So the lorries are coming on a regular basis. So there's smaller quantities coming with the oil than would be with the HGVs, which is why the HGVs. So you're right, whilst the calorific values are lower, there's less vehicles because they're coming in as full loads, not small loads and often. So that's what they spoke about earlier.
I think you'll find that we have a proposal that has been seconded. Before I go to the vote, Mrs. Weaver, do you wish to just come back at all on anything?
Yes, please. And my apologies, members. Turns out the other points I couldn't remember in the conditions is quite an important one of relevant to planning. My colleague has just reminded me that such condition adding in the annual monitoring report would not pass that test, and therefore we could not amend the condition to require that, as it wouldn't pass the test of the MPPF for conditions, as it's not relevant to planning. Apologies.
With respect, we agreed this, as you rightly said yourself, Chairman, on a previous, about 3 meetings ago or 2 meetings ago. So it can't, if it was right then, it's got to be right now. Or if it was wrong then.
I can take further advice on this. Actually, Mehdi, can you assist us, please?
Thank you, Chair. I think it's quite important that we look at the provisions that are laid before us under the Town and Country Planning Act. In specific, looking at the legal powers in relation to conditions which are namely covered under section 70 on onwards, in particular section 70 subsection 1A. Mindful that there's also MPPF guidance out there under para 55, which covers the sequential tests behind the imposition of conditions that relate to necessity, relevance to planning, relevant to the development to be permitted, enforceable, precise and reasonable in all other respect. In this regard, I'm mindful to point out that our provisions here in planning lie with the Town and Country Planning Act, whereas some of the requirements that members are asking here is covered under the Environmental Health Act of 1990 that we don't have any control over from planning. But most certainly there is an aspect of further control by environmental health or public protection that can then be relayed on to us if there is any certain breaches on any of the conditions that we presently have in place.
Well, Councillor Law, you've heard the advice, and
I just don't know who's going to monitor the breaches or the potential breaches. We're asking for an annual report coming back from the applicants. I don't understand how you would monitor this any other way.
Right. Well, Mehdi, can you assist us here?
Thank you. We are here to assess the application on the merits of what's put before us at the moment. Mindful that Environmental Health have come back with no objections on the proposal as presented, and I think we have to make a decision. Members have to make a decision based on the information that's relayed before them at this present stage.
So, Councillor Law, can you heed that advice?
I'm not at all happy now with my proposal.
Sorry, you're not?
I'm not at all happy now with my proposal.
Are you withdrawing it?
I think I will, yes.
Okay. So, members, I do still need a proposal of some kind. You've heard the professional advice from our officers. May I have another proposal? Councillor Linden.
Yes, Chairman, just test the waters. I propose officers' recommendations.
As stated on the agenda paper.
As stated
obviously.
on the agenda.
Does that find a seconder? Councillor Macro. Right. Does anyone wish to ask any further questions on that? Or I shall go to the vote. You have a proposal for officers' recommendation as stated in the papers. Those in favour, please, when I ask you to raise your hands, could you raise them in front of the camera so we can see actually on the screen, please? Those in favour, please show. I make that Councillor Linden 4. Are you voting? Yes. That's 4. 5. Oh, 5. I beg your pardon. Those against, please show. I take it the rest of us are abstaining on that. Yes. Okay. So conditional permission is granted. Thank you, members. And thank you, Mrs. Weaver.
The lawyers drafting regulations win again. Eh?
Right, members, without further ado, we come to a trio of applications. Just waiting for our planning officers to change seats. Now, members, this is a linked system. Those of you who could attend the site visit would appreciate. So I think what, with your permission, what I think will happen, I will ask Emma Nucci to introduce the first item in full. Clearly, there are 3 distinct applications which must each be considered on each individual merit. Having said that, there are indeed similarities. What I'm trying to avoid is, let's call it unnecessary duplication. If there are specific issues relating to each application, it is of course our role to ensure that those points are debated and raised and questioned. But so with your permission, I'm going to ask, once the technology is sorted out to my left, that the first application is considered or introduced in full. And we have 2 gentlemen wishing to speak to this application who are in the chamber. Gentlemen, when it is your turn to be called, if you could go to the dais there, please, you'll find a button which will illuminate a red ring around the microphone. You would have up to 5 minutes, and please, if I could ask you to remain there after you have spoken for any questions that members may have. Mrs. Nucci, are you ready?
Yes. Yes, thank you.
Right, well, let's go for the first one, and it's land to the north of Bowling Green Road. It's actually correct in the agenda, just not on the cover page, Councillor Woodhams. I know that. Well, good. So, Mrs. Nucci, over to you.
Thank you. So the this application is for land north of Bowling Green Road. It's an application for drainage basins and associated engineering works to include the creation of a bund, regrading the existing ditch, and deposition of excess spoil from the basin, but there is a preference to reuse that spoil on site and not take it off site. The application is recommended for approval subject to conditions, and also an additional condition on the update sheet, which relates to the future management of the basin's culverts and the drainage works that are being considered this evening. The 3 applications before committee this evening relate to the construction, as I say, of flood drainage basins, and the schemes form part of the Thatcham Surface Water Management Plan that was produced in 2010 following widespread surface water flooding back in July 2007. So the schemes will form a network of basins and reservoirs around North Thatcham, and they'll prevent surface water runoff from the rural areas and the rural catchment above the town from actually causing flooding within the northern parts of Thatcham. So the schemes have been individually assessed. As I say, we've got 3 applications before us, but they're before this committee today, as the basins will effectively work together in order to be most effective in protecting Thatcham should a similar event occur to that which happened, as I say, back in 2007. So before you at the moment on the screen is the location plan. You can see on the left-hand side of the plan, there's a narrow strip of land outlined in red, which is just to the north of Tollway. This is some land that's been identified for the deposition of the excess spoil. If there's any spoil on site during the creation of the basins that needs to come off site, this is identified as an area for it to be deposited. In the middle of the location plan, you've got a larger red area outlined, and it's in 2 sections. The southern part of it is where the new basin is being proposed, and the northern section is where, again, any excess spoil that needs to be deposited will be laid. And then to the right of that, you've got a very narrow strip of land. It's about 12 metres long, and that's an existing drainage ditch that will be where some regrading works will take place. The purpose of that is to accommodate water during extreme flows and direct it into the new basin that's being created. So the basin itself is accessed from Bowling Green Road. You can see the new access being proposed with an access track, and then the bund is on the lower part of that field. There is also the orange line around the bund is an access track that's for maintenance. The works will be mainly sort of soft landscaping engineering works to create a basin with a culvert as well. The entrance is proposed off Bowling Green Road, and it's next to an existing entrance which will be blocked up and planted, and a new entranceway will be created. It will require the removal of a number of trees. The loss of these trees has been considered in an arboricultural report, and no objection has been raised by the tree officer. And the scheme itself is supported by a comprehensive landscape proposals. Effectively, around the edge of the new bund, there will become a new an area of planting to the north with feature oak trees and the creation of a new hedge, which will effectively sort of create a new boundary to the field. And the design is or seeks to help integrate the works within the landscape. This is the existing site at the moment. On the western boundary, which is what you can see in the photo, are some very large established oak trees. This photo doesn't really do them justice, to be fair. We saw on site they are quite spectacular trees, and the application is supported by an arboricultural impact assessment, and tree protection measures will be put in place during construction. The trees are not covered by a TPO, but officers have asked for the tree officer to look into placing a TPO on the trees. And irrespective of that status, we consider that the trees are effectively protected during the development. This is another view of the site, looking further up. Earlier on in the presentation, I made reference to a drainage ditch. At the bottom of this plan, you can see outlined in red a sort of rectangular sort of site that's outlined with a yellow line through it. That is the drainage ditch. No trees need to be removed from this point. It's just regrading works in order to increase its capacity. In terms of any material that does need to be taken off site, the application is supported by a soil spreading strategy. So those works will take place. The application has been consulted on as required, and there's no objections raised by statutory consultees. You will see in section 4.2 of the report that we have had some objections from one contributor. One of the concerns raised is for the impact on the large oak trees. And as mentioned, it's considered that they are adequately protected and their value is recognised. Other concerns have been raised for the ecological impacts of the proposal. The scheme's supported by a biodiversity net gain calculator, which shows that there'll actually be a gain in habitat diversity from multiple types of habitat being created. Concerns raised for the ongoing management and maintenance of the culvert and channels. That has been addressed by an additional condition that's been added on the update sheet. And concerns for noise during construction hours. Again, we have a condition covering that. The final concern that was raised by a third party relates to the impact of soil disposal on the site. As I've said, the application is supported by a biodiversity net gain calculator, which looked at the areas where that soil is to be disposed. So the ecological impacts of that soil disposal has been considered alongside tree protection. And there are conditions to ensure that's in place before any disposal occurs. So in summary, there haven't been any statutory consultee objection to the proposal, and in conclusion, the works aren't considered to have a negative impact on the character or appearance of the area, and any loss of trees and hedgerows for creating the access can be mitigated. The proposals will deliver a significant social benefit, protecting properties from flooding, and also businesses, which in turn will have economic benefits as well, and security for those people working and living in Thatcham. In conclusion, the application is recommended for approval, subject to conditions and the condition on the update. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. Tom, if you could tell me, please, when Councillor Pete Murray from Coldash Parish Council is in the room.
Mr. Chairman, Pete Murray is in the room.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. Can you hear us?
I can. Good evening.
Sorry, good evening to you. I pressed the button the wrong way around. You have up to 5 minutes to make your case. Can I assist you with any timekeeping?
Only with 1 minute to go, if possible, please.
I will do that if you're still talking, with pleasure. So, and please remain virtually there for any questions members may have after you've spoken. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, council members. My name is Pete Murray. I'm the council from the parish of Coldash, and I'd like to really talk about the west, the land, west of Heath Lane in particular. Overall, we're very supportive of the flood measures themselves, but we are objecting to the access road onto the roundabouts near Heath Lane. We believe it's excessive for the purposes that are shown.
Could I, sorry, rudely interrupting, and I have stopped my stopwatch. We are talking specifically about the one you may have just seen.
Okay, I'm sorry,
I think you're talking about the second.
I thought you were linking them together, Mr. Chairman.
No, we're not. I'm sorry if you missed that. We have to. There are 3 separate applications, so we have to consider each one on its own merits. Having said that, the basic principles, I don't want to rehash at each one, but specific differences, I think it is absolutely relevant for you to raise. So, do you have any comments to make on the first application?
The only comment is I've reached out to the tree officer about the TPOs. When we walked the site last week, I said I would do that. Unfortunately, I've not heard back from him. We recognise that there are good measures in place to protect the trees, but we think TPOs would be a sensible next step. But I've not heard anything back, so I'm unable to pursue that point.
Okay. Now, I haven't cut you off. When it comes to the second application, we'll bring you back in, and you can make your comments about the Heath Road part at that time. Is that okay?
That's fine. Thank you.
Right. Thanks. Right. Now, members, do you have any questions? I think the only comment that Councillor Murray was talking about was the TPOs. Does anyone have any questions? Councillor Mays, is that a legacy hand? Or, oh, no, Councillor Mays.
New one. Thank you, Chairman. Can I just confirm, member, that the oak trees that we saw on the western boundary of the site are inside the red line, or most of them are?
The actual trees themselves are actually on the site boundary. They're just outside the application site. They're in the neighbour's property.
Yeah, well, I realise that. That's why I'm asking the question. But
yes.
the red line on the drawings appears to be outside the trees. The trees are within the site we're talking about.
Could we address this, please, when it comes to questions to officers? We're actually questions to Councillor Murray from Coldash Parish Council. Members, do any of you have questions for him, please? No? No. Councillor Murray, we'll come back to you on the next one, I promise. Right, we now have Alistair Lees, who is an objector. Tom, can you please tell me when he is in the room?
He is now in the room, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Lees. Can you hear us?
Hello there, good evening. Hopefully you can see me as well.
We can see and hear you. Now you have up to 5 minutes. And as I say to everybody, can I assist you with any timekeeping?
Thank you. Maybe just a little wave at kind of a minute to go would be very helpful. Thank you.
I will do that. Please remain there for any questions members may have after you've spoken. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, Chairman and members of the committee. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak at today's planning meeting. I will be brief. I'd firstly like to thank Emma for succinctly summarising our 3 letters that we've submitted to date. And I appreciate also the visit from the committee last Wednesday to Hennick. I should be very clear, we're not objecting to the scheme per se, since we understand the driver to protect Thatcham from events such as those in 2007. What we are calling for are certain conditions to be included with reference to this planning application. And there are 3 important topics I'd like to cover. Firstly, as been discussed, oaks. I think everyone appreciated the veteran oaks when they were on site, and there are very few specimens of this age across West Berks, and we consider ourselves owners and custodians for the next generation. In August 2021, West Berks committed that these oaks would not be touched. However, looking at the plans in the planning application, it is not clear, and recent comments, as highlighted in our letter of the 17th of May, seem to suggest that the guidelines will be refined when the equipment's on site, specifically only finalising the root protection area and the branches cut diameters when the detailed construction methodology is finalised, and when access, lifting, excavation involving heavy plant and machinery is being scoped. Those things cause us concern, because we must protect these veteran oaks. So some of them are up to 500 years old. I think furthermore, suggesting the height of the pruning seems very excessive and destructive, and it's going to cause irreparable damage. Bearing in mind the conditions are specifically to only hand dig the areas where there are root protection zones, so to clear that high doesn't seem necessary. The second point is around soil runoff, and I'm pleased there's no proposed soil dispersion in the oak habitats. And the bit that is of concern is the recent addition of soil dispersion in the wider area, and we don't believe that's been fully considered in the way of the original application, particularly around ecology, trees, and when members were on site, they saw animals such as deer that were passing through this area and coming to feed in our garden. The hydrology and the loose soil causes us concern, and our strong recommendation would be for a no soil dumping zone within 15 metres of the stream, that's i.e. the western boundary, and protect against the damage from excavators against the other mature trees to the north, and those include oaks and ashes, nor any risk of soil erosion to the stream causing the widespread flooding. And fundamentally, this is upstream of the flood alleviation scheme we're talking about, and provides a risk to our property in Thatcham in the event of heavy rains. And we all know what happened in 2007 with heavy rains in the summer. And again, we saw it on Monday. We cannot afford for the stream to block due to loose or dispersed soil. The final point is around maintenance, and I'm very pleased to hear some of the conditions that were mentioned here, that specifically the culvert must be kept clear, or otherwise the whole scheme will not work. The schedule and the process and any documentations that can be put in place and recorded as part of the conditions, what I think will very much help in this area. So just to summarise, the 3 things we're looking for here: agreed pruning plan before works commence, avoiding any damage to the veteran oaks. Secondly, a green corridor with no spoil in the tree protection zones and anywhere near along the stream to the western boundary. And thirdly, the no development until reports can be. Yeah, thank you. No development until the reports can be produced specifically around ecology and hydrology of the additional new soil impact that's being proposed. In closing, as we all go into the Jubilee Platinum weekend of our Queen Elizabeth II, I very much hope that we together can put in place the necessary protections that I've outlined to protect and avoid any harm to the veteran oaks that were planted in the time of Queen Elizabeth I and leave these spectacular specimens undisturbed to be appreciated by future generations. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much, Mr. Lees. Members, any questions? No, I think we're going to let you. Oh, Councillor Mays.
Chairman, thank you very much. Mr. Lees, can you just confirm what I was asking earlier, that the trees that you're talking about on the western boundary of the site and also towards the north, you're concerned about them being affected and not being covered by extant TPO. Are they actually in your land, or are they on the site that's within the red line that we're talking about?
Your question was spot on, Councillor Mays. They indeed, those oaks fall in our land, and they're also included in the scheme. So there is something that needs to be discussed there. There's also I'll let Stuart Clark comment on that point specifically when he gets a chance to speak. Those oaks are on our land, and they're included in the scheme.
All right, thank you very much.
Right, well, thank you, Councillor Mays. Yes, that was a good question that time, well timed. Right, other members, any other questions? No, thank you, Mr. Lees, very much.
Thank you.
We now have Brian Woodham, no relation, from the Thatcham Flood Forum, and Keith Hodinott, I believe, a supporter. Gentlemen, please come to the dais.
That's right. Not in the front.
On the front.
Down the bottom.
Down the bottom, the one on the one with like a person with a
red light has come on. Is this good news?
That's very good news, and we can hear you.
Excellent.
Now, I think you've got the score by now. Up to 5 minutes. I will wave to you with a minute to go if you're still talking, or interrupt you or something.
Absolutely.
But please remain there for any questions members may have.
Thank you. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you for this opportunity to speak to you tonight on what are three very important elements of the total Thatcham Surface Water Management Plan. I'm wearing two hats tonight in the sense that I've been a steering committee member of the Flood Forum since 2009, and since 2011 I have been chairman of the Surface Water Management Plan Funding Committee that was set up with the support of Nick Carter and Richard Bennion when we found out that the Environment Agency had refused all funding for the Surface Water Management Plan, having only adopted it a year before, along with WBC. So we decided that there and then we would break it all up and we'd go one sub-scheme at a time for as long as it took. So I want to just position the three schemes that are before you tonight and just set the background. They're all for tonight's decisions. Firstly, they are all West Berkshire Council projects. So that implies three things. They're publicly funded. They are publicly owned through compulsory purchase, and they will be publicly maintained in perpetuity by the council. They are strategic defences in the sense that Emma used a term about they all work together. Think of these as the last fingers in the dike, the virtual dike above Thatcham, that if any one of these isn't approved, there is an exposure to the integrity of the total scheme. May not be massive, but it's there. So these are important to complete the sort of ring of protection around the north and east of the town. And what they are really there for is to protect the existing housing in Thatcham. And they're in no way to facilitate any potential new developments that may or may not happen to come on those same sites. And in that sense, what we have here are schemes that will have guaranteed long-term publicly funded maintenance, which is vital for strategic flood defences. So where are we with the SWMP? 3 major reservoirs built and a lagoon route already through the east side of Thatcham, through the playing fields and Dunstan Green. So far, these schemes will capture 132 million litres of stormwater so far. We have 30 million litres to go, and these three schemes form part of capturing the last 30 million that we need to catch. So far, £11 million of public money has been spent to get to where we are today. And within that, £200,000 has had to be raised by my committee in the form of grants and well, basically grants, which was enabling funding since 2014, when the Treasury ruled that for any flood defences to be applied for, there had to be a proof of need, and need was in the form of supplementary money raised by the local people, despite the fact they've been flooded, so don't ask me. But this 132 million litres so far will protect 960 of the 1,200 odd homes that we're seeking to protect overall. So we're, in round terms, we're about 80% of the way there, 20% to go. What do these new schemes add? Well, first of all, as we've said, they're all part of the adopted SWMP. This has not been invented. This is an adopted set of schemes. And we talked about completing the ring of interception and the hillside runoff, and the vitality of these. They're vital to the overall scheme.
1 minute.
So why is approval needed now? Why is it tonight? We have the 2.85 million funding approved for these three schemes, but they're time dependent. And the time dependent is that site work must commence by September. Why does that matter so much? Well, we've already been delayed 3 months, not complaining, but it was for bird nesting and reasons, and we understand that, but we need to get on. Any further delay will compromise our ability to raise the funds we have applied for the final scheme that we want to build in 2023. So we're asking tonight, please approve these schemes in their totality and send a message that we can deliver to the Environment Agency that the Council is absolutely behind completing the thatch and surface water management plan in its entirety by the end of 2023. Thank you very much.
You practiced that well. That's bang on time. I'm very impressed. Thank you. Members, any questions, please, for Mr. Woodham? Looking specifically at Councillor Mays, in case he pops up. Even Councillor Mays is floored by what you told us, so thank you very much indeed. Now, I'm just being told, unfortunately, Stuart, oh, sorry.
Yes.
We're letting you off lightly. Please,
yes.
Will you return to your seat? We have no questions clear. You obviously put it over very, very clearly and succinctly to us.
Do you want to switch the mic off?
Oh, sorry, someone. Thank you. Right, I understand, unfortunately, Stuart Clark is unwell and is unable to attend, but we have Brian Cafferkey, who is the agent that the council has employed. Tom, could you advise me, please, when he is in the room, please?
Mr. Chairman, he's in the room now.
Thank you, Mr. Cafferkey. Good evening. Can you hear us?
Good evening, Chairman. I can. Thank you. Hello?
Hello. Can you hear us now? Yes.
Yes, I can. Yes.
Good. You have up to 5 minutes to address us. Don't be too technical, please. But please, would you remain in the room for any questions that members may have? Mr. Cafferkey, the time is yours.
Thank you. As being identified by Emerald Planning Officer, this is, and Mr. Woodham, this is one of the schemes that was part of the Surface Waters Management Plan, one of 6 pilot schemes that was undertaken by West Berkshire and DEFRA back in 2010 when it was completed. The scheme, it basically, as Mr. Williams pointed out, is basically filling in the gaps where the residual surface water flows comes off North Hatcham. The scheme is approximately 0.2 of a hectare in size, with about a 0.7 metre high bund. It takes flows off the hillsides and conveys them into the basin proposed, and release them slowly back into the ditch to the south of the system, which eventually discharges into Thames Water sewers. The scheme is again one of three schemes we're going to look at tonight, but the premise is pretty much the same for all three, and we're looking to get all three sort of approved tonight. So, Chairman, that sort of basically summarises. I don't want to repeat what Emma, our planning officer, and Brian Williams stated earlier on.
Thank you very much indeed. Very, very good. Councillor Linden.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, so Mr. Kafke, we were at the site visit together. Can you give any further assurance to Mr. Leese in concerns with his oak trees and other conditions, please?
Yeah, so in relation to the oak trees, as part of the due diligence we've done, we undertook some trial pitting so that the actual scheme has been located far enough away so it doesn't impact on the oak's roots. So trial pitting was undertaken before we finalised design to locate where the extent of the oak tree. So these trial pits to the west of the scheme were undertaken outside the canopy of the existing oak trees, and none. Some smaller fine roots were identified, but none, based on the agricultural report, were of any significance in terms of detriment to the current oak trees. So all due diligence in terms of identifying and locating the scheme has been taken and ensuring that there's no detriment to the existing oak trees.
Thank you, Chairman.
Right, thank you, Councillor Linden. Councillor Mays.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Mr. Caffrey, can I ask you one question about the amount of water that you're preparing to deal with in this site? How did you calculate the volumes quoted in the document we have before us?
Right, so I won't go into too technical. It is quite technical, but basically what we've done is we looked at the catchment to the north of this particular basin, and we identified the volume of runoff that comes off that catchment heading south towards the basin, and calculated these flows. Now, this is all hydraulically undertaken with hydraulic models, industry standard models, and the volumes that created and the volume that would be contained within this basin would be approximately about 2,800 cubic meters of volume of flood water. The actual basin itself is designed to accommodate the 100-year climate change event, which is in line with national standards and government guidelines.
Fine, thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other?
One other question. You talk about the excavation for the water to be stored. What is your basis for reuse of the soil that's excavated, and what basis is there for discarding it to one of the spoil sites?
So if I understand correctly, what we're trying to do is obviously reuse all the material we excavate. So in terms of biodiversity, in terms of reaching a carbon net, or as good a carbon net value as we can, we're trying to, and in terms of good engineering practice, we're reusing the material that's suitable to create the bonds. Where we've got an excess of material, we've identified two locations, and one of them being Bowling Green, the Bowling Green site, where we're looking to spread out the excess material to the north of this basin to minimise the cost of exporting material off-site, which has an implication in terms of the cost-benefit value for the schemes overall, in terms of value for money that the government is putting into the schemes. So we're reducing our spend by spreading this excess material over existing ground.
But what are you actually looking for? Are you looking for clays or silts or sand materials?
Clays are ideal for this.
So you're looking for the clay fraction?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Well, don't get too technical here, Councillor Mays. I have one question. We spent a lot of time on the site visit looking at and taking trouble to not only admire, but take account of those magnificent oak trees. And you stated very clearly that the root protection area should be protected. What puzzles me is why potentially the canopy of those trees needs to be raised. If you're not going anywhere near them, why are you, to put it bluntly, cutting lumps off them, or potentially cutting lumps off them? Why can't they just be left or just trimmed around the edges tidily?
Right. As far the arboriculture has identified a number of trees that they would like to trim. However, when we spoke with Mr. Lees, the owner at Kennick Farm, we identified that it's probably a good idea that both the arboriculturists and Mr. Hennig get together, Mr. Lees get together and look at where the trimming could occur. We're back far enough from the outside the tree root protection zone, but it was identified in the arboriculturist report that it may be prudent for the health of the trees, and also making easy access in terms of getting in and out for future maintenance vehicles for some of those trees to be trimmed. But again, that's something that I believe can be agreed with the owner when this does occur on site. As far as I'm aware, there's only one branch of one of the oak trees that is pretty much dead, and it would be beneficial to get that removed.
Well, I think we saw that actually
Yes,
when on the
yeah.
site visit, didn't we? So, I mean, all trees need maintenance. I'm just making sure that they're also protected in the way in which old trees like that should be. But anyway, that's not a debating point, I promise. Members, any questions? Any further questions for Mr. Cafferty? Councillor May, is that a legacy? Thank you. Right, thank you very much. Members, do we have any questions for our officers? Councillor Linden.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to ask Emma Nutchley the points raised by Mr. Lees concerning the conditions. You also mentioned about the pruning. I know this is a bit of indulgence, Chairman, on terms of conditions. Do you have any answers to that on conditions to protect the oak trees, please?
Okay, thank you. So condition number 4 on the agenda secures the implementation of tree protection measures. The application is accompanied by a tree protection plan, and that has been approved by the tree officer, and condition 4 secures the implementation of that. So that's with regards to root protection for the trees. And condition 6 relates to arboricultural site supervision. So the application was accompanied by an arboricultural impact assessment. It set out the appropriate mitigation measures, including the tree protection plan, but other measures as well. But it also requires for a suitably qualified tree specialist to be on site when certain works take place. The report does give some flexibility for the exact works to be agreed on site, and we've heard that there's obviously some discussion there between the landowner and the applicant when those works take place. But condition 6, as I say, I think the key point is there it secures the presence of an arborist on site to oversee those works.
So in your professional opinion, you don't think we need a TPO on those oaks?
I think they're two separate issues. I think what we're looking at tonight, the trees at the moment aren't TPO'd, but we recognise their value, and therefore it's material consideration to protection, and consider that on the advice of the tree officer, those trees are adequately protected. Alongside that, though, the tree officer will be looking at separately to this application whether they are worthy of a TPO.
Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Law.
I think Emma has just addressed my question. Yeah, I was very simply asking, I believe reading the conditions 4, 5, and 6, we're doing our best to protect these trees. fact, we're probably doing a lot more than we've done in any other places. It just seemed to me the question was a very simple one. Why didn't we go the whole hog and have TPOs? It's obviously been looked at separately, but the question is still in my mind. Why didn't we just do it? I've seen TPOs put on for lesser reasons.
Indeed, but that's outside our remit, as you know. But let's say I'm sure the matter will be pursued. Councillor Woodhams.
Thank you, Chairman.
I'm sorry, Chairman.
Sorry, Councillor Lord.
I was asked that question of the officers. Why didn't we go the whole?
Oh, why didn't we? All right. Why did we not go for TPOs?
Well, as I say, it has been the question has been asked and raised with the tree officer to consider their value and whether they are worthy. So that request has been put in and is being looked into.
I understand that, Emma. My real question was, so why hasn't it been done? Well, yet, and perhaps with trees being, I can understand you're not the tree specialist. I can understand why but I can think with trees are a big issue here, why the tree officer isn't here.
Indeed. Mehdi, can you assist, please?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Lord. Just to kind of, it is a fairly drawn out process to kind of get that process under the way. There's notifying landowners, then making that public, disclosing those documents, allowing consultations to come in. So that process in effect does take a short while to get done. But I believe under the primary legislation here and the secondary one here being the tree preservation regulations 2012, there is part 14 of that, which covers the series of protected activities on trees as far as safeguarded by TPOs are successfully achieved with these conditions 3 to 6. So I believe some of the measures under the secondary legislation is to some degree captured by the conditions imposed, but it's definitely something that we need to discuss further with the arboricultural officer at some point and see how we can process that faster.
I don't suppose there's any chance of a recommendation or a condition that we look at. There is an action on the tree officer to look at the TPOs.
Can we do that, Mehdi?
I don't believe we can, because the instructions for a TPO has to come from the council and council officers as opposed to the applicant themselves.
I'm sure we can always add an informative.
I thought I was a member of council.
Yes, quite. But we can always add an informative. That is in our power.
I think I would.
Councillor Woodhams, I did come to you next.
Well, thank you, Chairman. Can we have confirmation that existing culverts will be kept clear at all times? I think it was raised by a speaker earlier, Chairman.
It was indeed. Emma.
Thank you. So the basins, the culverts, the ditches will all be managed by the lead local flood authority. They'll be managed by the council themselves. And I have added an additional condition to the update sheet, which seeks details of that management and secures it for the sort of perpetuity of the basins. So we've addressed it by condition.
Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Mays.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I've got a problem here with the ownership. One of the earlier people who was speaking talked about compulsory purchase orders. We are the applicant and we're also the client, basically, I suppose it's in this case. Can you actually clarify where we stand as a local authority, as a unitary authority, West Berkshire? Are we the owner, we're the applicant, and we're also going for compulsory purchase where it's required?
So from a planning perspective, the applicant is West Berkshire Council. They've put in the application. It is on somebody else's land, and therefore they have served the appropriate notices on that landowner. We are considering the proposal that's before us. It is a separate non-material consideration to planning about the land ownership and how that will be managed going forward. It's not something that we can either control or is material to our discussion, but it's something that will be looked at separately and would obviously need to be resolved before it's implemented, were permission granted.
Compulsory purchase is on the cards if necessary.
I don't know what mechanisms will be used. That's, as I say, outside of planning, I'm afraid. So it's not something I can advise on.
Okay.
No, I think, yeah, my interpretation, Emma, and correct me if I've misinterpreted, is that is not a consideration for granting or not the planning permission that's before us.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Chairman,
Councillor Linden.
Just to clarify, Stuart Clark said at the site visit that this was under the Land Drainage Acts, and that will give hopefully an assurance to Councillor Mays.
And there has been, I believe, a lot of negotiation already, Councillor Mays, but I want to focus very much on the planning issues here, which is our remit. Mehdi?
Thank you, Chair. I'll only add about ownerships. Article 13 of the DMPO 2015 specifies that the signed certificate needs to be done on the application form. So from a planning officer's perspective, they just need to ensure that the application form, the signed certificates are done, and then we wouldn't delve into it any deeper than that, really.
Right, thank you. Members, if you've finished all the questioning, who is going to start the debate? Come on, someone has to. Councillor Law.
I'll do this, Chair. Maybe I'll have better luck this time. Yeah, I would like to. I think there's no debate about this. Really, we need to do it. I think it's been well researched, well supported by everyone in the council and in the relevant communities, as we heard. So I would no problem. Would like to go straight to a proposal for officer's recommendation, with one addition of an informative that the tree officer gives urgent priority to reviewing all of the relevant trees in the vicinity of this particular scheme.
Understood. I have three other members wishing to put their hands up, but does that find a seconder? Councillor all right. Councillor Woodhams, you would just beat Councillor Macro by a microsecond. Councillor Macro, you have your hand up to speak.
Thank you. I was just going to say, I do remember that terrible day in 2007 when it poured with rain all day, and I remember seeing the videos of torrents of water pouring through Thatcham streets, and the many residents who were out of their homes for months on end, if not years. So I think we really want to get on with this as soon as we possibly can.
Understood. Councillor Linden.
Yes, I'd like to concur with that. I was totally and utterly surprised to see that in Thatcham, and I think this is a vital plan. I fully support it, Chairman.
Councillor Mays.
Thank you, Chairman. I would like to say that I've actually gone through the engineering drawings pretty thoroughly, and I'm very happy with them.
Thank you for doing your due diligence on that. I'm very grateful. Councillor Woodhams, you seconded this. Is there anything you wish to add before I go to the vote?
Nothing to add, Chairman.
Oh, very succinct. Right, so we have a proposal which is officer's recommendation with the informative that TPOs are examined and urgently
given urgent priority.
With urgent priority. Those in favour, please show. I think that's unanimous, is it not? Right. Conditional permission is granted. We're going to move on to the next one. And Emma, I think if we can concentrate on the specific issues of this, I think we've covered the reasoning behind why we're doing this. And of course, Councillor Murray from Coldash will be able to make his comments about Heath Lane at the appropriate time. So Emma, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. And the third item on the agenda tonight is for development land west of Heath Lane in Thatcham. This application site it seeks to just on front of you at the moment, you've got the location plan, which shows at the top of the drawing, you've got the location for the basins that are proposed. Now, this application comprises of 2 basins within the same parcel of land. But the principles of the works themselves are similar to as we discussed previously. And the proposals similarly include the creation of bunds and some deposition of soil outside the application site. At the bottom of the location plan, you'll see that there's 2 other areas outlined in red. They are the same areas that were shown on the previous application and identified as being sites for potential soil disposal. So this application seeks permission for 2 basins within the land shown at the top of the plan, and it also seeks to deposit any extra spoil, as I say, on those same sites. So I won't discuss the principles of the soil disposal again, because you've already heard officers' opinions on those. So moving forward, the application is recommended for approval, subject to conditions. Again, there is a management condition for the basins and culverts on the update sheet as an additional condition to the recommendation, but otherwise the recommendation remains the same. The proposal comprises 2 basins. You've got a northern basin, which will have which covers an area of about 0.35 hectares and has a 0.6 metre high bund around it. And then you have the southern basin, which will have a 1.4 metre high earth bund around it. And then there is an access track down the middle of between the bunds. The application site can be seen in this photo. The hedge in this photo will need to be removed in order to sort of facilitate the creation of the bunds, and we did see that removal of planting when we were on site. No objections has been raised by the tree officer. They are considered to be low value trees, however, appreciate they do make a contribution to the landscape, but the scheme is supported by a landscaping strategy itself. And this is a look southwest across the site. This view is taken looking back at 2 of the properties, the bungalows that they don't actually back onto the site, but as you can see, they've got an open, sort of fairly open boundary there with the application site. So they're the sort of nearest neighbours. The site is to be accessed off the mini roundabout here at the end of Heath Lane, and effectively the new access will be created where the road signage is at the moment. This is the landscaping proposals that accompany the application. So the scheme will result in the removal of the hedge that we just saw, which currently sort of goes across the middle of the site, and it will also result in the removal of some trees at the new entrance. The proposals also seek to incorporate tree planting around the edge of the bund, sort of to create a new perimeter fence line, and also you can see there's some areas of tree planting to help integrate the scheme into the landscape. So this is this plan just shows in purple the areas where the existing trees are to be removed, and you can see that there are some well-established trees to the west that are being retained. And we have the detailed construction drawings. There's no statutory consultee objection to the application, and we're in receipt of 4 letters from third parties, one of which sought clarification on a particular matter. One part supports and part part objects, 1 supports, and we had 1 objection. The application seeking clarification raised queries about the maintenance, which has now been dealt with by condition in the update. And the other application supported the proposals given the historical issues with flooding. There was an objection on the grounds that the scheme would support future residential development, but that objection itself is speculative and is not material to this application. In conclusion, the landscape proposals are considered to conserve and enhance the existing landscape by strengthening and retaining existing boundary features and introducing additional oak tree planting and a new field boundary. The proposals themselves adequately provide protection for trees within the site, and no objections have been raised by Ecology and Highways. The scheme will deliver a significant social benefit, and that weighs heavily in favour of the scheme. And in the absence of any objections, the application is recommended for approval, subject to the conditions. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. Tom, could we bring Councillor Murray from Cold Parish Council back, please?
Right. Councillor Murray is back with us, Chairman.
Councillor Murray, welcome back.
Hello there.
Hello. Right, now you have up to 5 minutes to talk about what you were trying to talk about before. So can I assist you with any timekeeping?
Only with a minute to go, if possible, please.
Okay, I'll do that with pleasure.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for councillors for the opportunity to talk. Representing Cold Parish, where this development falls, basically. And I just really wanted to say that in terms of the flood management, we completely support it. And we have no objections to the overall premise of the plan at all. The issue that we are raising is the concern around the access road. During the update we just heard from the planning officer, it was referred to as a track. But if you look at the drawings, it really does look like quite a substantial junction, giveways markings on the road, and it looks like not only that, but the road itself extends quite north in the development site itself. And the concerns we've got is that we think it's excessive for the purpose of maintenance only. 4.8 meters, I understand, is standard, but it looks like it could well be an overkill for the task for purely maintenance reasons. The second point we brought out while we were walking the site last week is that we know that the landowner has been in conversation with West Berks Council and has expressed a requirement or a request to have that road projecting much more northerly in the site, with the thought process for later and future development. CA12 has been considered for our NDP, but we are no longer allocating additional land as part of the NDP cycle at this moment in time. So what we really want to do is request, if possible, that we support the flood measures, but we would like to revisit the scale and size of the access road to ensure that we are only allowing for maintenance purposes for the site, and that we are in no means, way, or inferring that the road could be used in future to support an additional application for possible development on the CA12 site. So our comments and our objection really are around the access road itself, and not on the overall premise of the flood protection scheme, which we wholly support. Thank you.
Oh, okay, thank you. Members, any questions for Councillor Murray? So your comments are noted, and no doubt questions will be asked of officers too. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Woodham from the Thatcham Flood Forum, is there anything else you wish to add? Do you wish to come forward again?
Chairman, nothing to add. So we don't, never mind duplicate, we don't need to triplicate anything, do we? Thank you.
Thank you. We gave you the opportunity anyway. And could we bring Mr. Cafferkey back in, please, Tom?
Mr. Cafferkey is now back with us, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Cafferkey. Welcome back. Is there anything you specifically wish to add about this application, Mr. Cafferkey?
Just on the last query that was raised, insofar as the road width, we've got two basins here, and this actual road is an agricultural access. It's not really meant for vehicular access to future development. It's purely for an agricultural access, and that's in line with the West Berkshire guidance. The extent of the road itself, if you look at the plan, it terminates at the furthest head walls. So we need access in to maintain those head walls for pick up debris, etc., which obviously West Berkshire will do as part of looking after the scheme. So the extent of the highway into, or the highway, should I say, sorry, the access road into the scheme is purely for maintenance only. In terms of any future development, that hasn't come into the design philosophy at all. And that's what I'd like to say. In terms of the premise of the scheme, it's similar to what we had at Bowling Green, so I don't want to repeat the workings of it. We're happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Members, any questions for Mr. Cafferkey? There appears none. Oh, Councillor Mays, sorry.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm sorry to be boring, but I have to ask these questions. Mr. Cafferkey, can you tell me how you've estimated the amount of storage volume you need. Have you any idea how much water rate of runoff you have allowed for or have you designed for? Because it's not quoted in the document I've got.
Right. So with all these schemes that we're looking at tonight, the design criteria is accommodating the 100-year climate change event. So that's the 100-year plus 40% climate change in line with Environment Agency and national guidance in accord with the NPPF. So in terms of volumes, I think it's stated in the document in front of us. The northern basin will contain 5,300 cubic meters, and the southern basin approximately 3,000 cubic meters of storage. And that's sufficient to deal with the 100-year climate change event.
And you've based that on the volume of the catchment?
Correct, yeah. So the catchment draining into
those
that.
Two sites?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Right. Any other questions for Mr. Cafferkey? Otherwise, it's questions for officers. I'm going to ask a question. And Mr. Dowding, thank you, Mr. Dowding, for sitting there so patiently. We heard from the parish council representation just now about road markings on an access track. Do I take it that road markings from access tracks onto the public highway need to comply with the traffic regulations, as indeed they do if you go down Flora Way to another one of the schemes where there are indeed shiny white painted road markings from a similar sort of scheme? Could you advise us from with your highways hat on, please?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Matter of fact, this scheme has actually been road safety audited already at the initial stages, and that's one of the comments that came out of the road safety audit, was the fact that the markings and signage coming out of the site had to comply to highway standards, and that modifications from the original design had to be made to ensure that it was very clear to people not only using the access, but people arriving at that junction, what that access was. So yes, there has to be a minimum standard for sign and line. It may well look over the top to some people, but to ensure that everyone knows safely what is happening at the junction, it has to be provided.
Thank you very much. Councillor Linden.
Yeah, just to clarify, so that includes, in your view, that that it is the right site? Because I know Councillor Murray thought it might be too large.
The width for the access road is not something that we have really commented on, because let's be honest, the developer of these basins is not going to build anything excessive, as it would be a waste of money for a maintenance track. You've got to allow the fact that there will be swept paths of maintenance vehicles, agricultural vehicles going in and out of that site. So some allowance has to be made for a slightly wider track than what you would possibly want for just a small sort of maintenance area. But I don't think that it's excessive for what it's required for. It's certainly not in the width that would be required for any form of housing development. And for a certain fact, there's no footway provision. So as an access to any sort of housing development, it would have to be greatly modified anyway to meet standards.
Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, I'm looking, I see no further hands. Pause 2, 3. No, who's going to start the debate?
Chairman.
Councillor Linden.
Yes, Chairman, I think that it's an excellent scheme, and I'd like to propose officers' recommendations as amended.
Thank you. Does that find a seconder? Councillor Macro, you had your hand up as well, so you're seconding this. Do you wish to speak too? Wait, would you use your microphone, please?
Sorry. But our proposal should include the extra condition on that, actually.
Oh, absolutely.
I've already proposed that, Chairman, on that one.
Yes. Right. So does anyone wish to enter further into the debate? I have a proposal of officer's recommendation, including the extra condition on the update sheet. Those in favour, please show. Again, unanimous. Thank you, members. Shall we crack on? Right, we'll crack on to the last one, which is the one at the other end of junction of Floral Way to Bath Road. Emma.
Thank you, Chairman. Okay, so, item number 4 relates to a further drainage basin, as we've heard, on the land at the junction of Floral Way. Similarly, again, with the location plan, it identifies at the top the 2 areas where spoil could be deposited. And at the bottom on the right section of the plan, we've got the area of the application site for the new basin. This is for a single basin this time, and the basin will be surrounded by a bund ranging from 0.6 metres to 1.6 metres high. And the bund itself will be an earth bund. The proposals also seek to realign an existing ditch for 320 metres into the proposed basin and regrading some of the ditch. The realignment of the existing ditch can be seen on this plan that's in front of you. So the application site is sort of L shape. So if you start at the northern part of the site on the edge of or adjacent to Floral Way, you'll see a sort of blue channel that's created, and it's travels southwards down to the south of the site into the new basin. This is the new realigned drainage ditch, and by realigning that ditch, which currently is next to Floral Way, it will mean that the vegetated planted boundary along Floral Way won't need to be disturbed. So those works help to protect existing trees. The site will be accessed from a new entranceway off of Bath Road A4, and you can see the location of that entrance, which is between 2 established oak trees which are to be retained, and the tree officers confirmed their retention. The boundary along that edge of the site is very well screened, and again will be retained as part of the application. I referred to the ditch being diverted. This is the established boundary along Floral Way, and it's the other side of this hedge within the field that ditch will be created. And as I say, it allows for the retention of that planting. So from Floral Way, there will be no real views of the application proposals. And here we have a view across the site, which is currently at the moment grassland. The application has been subject to full consultation, and no objection has been raised by statutory consultees. There have been some objections from a contributor to the proposals, with concerns over the sort of design and landscaping and location of the basin, along with concerns as to why the proposal doesn't use the existing Thames Water balancing pond, which is currently outside of the application site on the corner of the junction at Floral Way. It's a pond that we saw during the site visit. There is technical reasons for that, and they are outlined in the report. The balancing pond serves the existing residential development in the area, and this basin is designed to function during a flood event. So they serve separate purposes, and therefore it wouldn't be suitable to sort of mix the two. The proposal has been assessed in terms of its impact on the character of the area, on the sort of landscape, on trees and ecology, and no objections have been raised by statutory consultees. It's considered that there's very minimal impact from the development, and the strong social and economic benefits weigh in favour of the application. It's therefore recommended for conditional approval, again with an extra condition in the update with regards to the management of the culverts and basins going forward. Thank you.
Right, thank you, Emma. Right, Tom, we have Richard Asher, an objector wishing to speak and join us on Zoom. Could you please advise me when he's in the room?
Mr. Asher is in the room, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Asher, can you hear us? Yes, Mr. Asher, you seem to be, we can't see you, and I think you're muted. If you could, you're unmuted. That's good. Could we see you as well?
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you. Could we see you as well, possibly? That's brilliant.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you very much.
You have up to 5 minutes to address us.
Thank you.
Do you want any assistance with timekeeping?
If you can wave at me if I have a minute to go.
I will do that with pleasure. Please remain there after you've spoken for any questions members may have.
Certainly.
So.
Right, good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to address you. My name is Richard Asher. I'm a chartered surveyor and a director of Savills, and I represent the objectors who are J.G. Janaway and Son. They are the landowners of the property on which this basin, which is the subject of the application, would be built if the application is approved. My clients do not object to the principle of the flood prevention basin being built on their land, all the associated works necessary to construct and maintain it. Indeed, they recognise and understand the need for the flood prevention measures for the town of Thatcham. However, they have two concerns. Firstly, they do not consider that the design of the basin has been optimised, in that no consideration appears to have been given to the incorporation of the flood protection lagoon already in existence at the west end of the site adjacent to Floral Way. I think you already referred to that site yourself, Mr. Chairman. I'm led to believe that this lagoon is under the control of Thames Water, and that no discussions have taken place between Thames Water and West Berkshire regarding the integration of design of the proposed basin with the existing one. Consequently, our clients fear that the current proposal may require more of their land than to be taken up by the proposed basin than would otherwise be necessary. This is why they are objecting to the application. We would ask the planning committee to defer their decision until the council have been able to hold discussions with Thames Water. The second point is that the surroundings to the proposed lagoon would attract dog walkers and their dogs. The concern is that such dogs could escape from the confines around the lagoon and encroach onto the remaining farmland belonging to my clients. Such encroachment could cause damage and distress to livestock and wildlife on my client's land, adjoining land. I appreciate that this second objection could be addressed by design considerations to maintain security between the basin surroundings and the adjoining land retained by my clients. Thank you very much.
Right, thank you, Mr. Asher. Members, any questions, please, for Mr. Asher? No, I see none. Thank you very much indeed. Tom, could you bring Mr. Kafiki back in, please? That was remiss of me. Mr. Woodham, would you like to come and tell us if there's anything else you'd like to add?
Perhaps one point, Mr. Chairman and members. We're going to have, I imagine the discussion will take place in a few minutes, but the idea that you integrate two completely different engineering structures automatically compromises what this proposal is for, which is to protect the town of Thatcham from surface water runoff and not to be combined with another lagoon that's there for a completely different purpose. And so I'd be very concerned if the proposal to delay for a putative meeting between Thames Water and the council, which would put this whole project back by months for no particular reason, I think would be a very serious blow to the aspirations that we all have to get Thatcham protected. Thank you.
Please remain there. Councillor Law, I think you're going to ask the question I was going to.
Well, let me try then. Brian, what is the purpose of that other Thames Water lagoon?
I would defer to Mr. Kafiki, who has more knowledge of these things, but it's not surface water runoff, right? It's to do with housing and sewerage. It's not to do with the surface water running off the greenfield sites coming down the hillside. Two completely different components. And indeed, that basin was there in 2007. Yeah. Was it effective? Thank you.
That was indeed the question I was going to ask. We'll ask Mr. Kafiki if he doesn't cover it. Although he's listening intently, I'm sure he will. Any other questions for Mr. Woodham? No. Thank you indeed. Mr. Kafiki, I'm sure you heard that.
Yes, I did, Chairman.
You have again up to 5 minutes. Please, could you address that and the other points you wish to raise relating to this application?
I won't go through the premise of how the scheme works. It's similar to the other scheme. So if there's any questions that people want to, councillors want to ask, please feel free. Just coming back to the previous question, I want to make this quite clear. We have flood alleviation schemes, which look at much larger catchments, i.e. the catchments to the north of Thatcham. And then we've got this basin, this Thames Water Asset, which is it's a balancing pond, which serves residential development, existing residential development. So that basin is designed for a 1 in 30-year event. Our scheme is designed for a 100-year plus climate change event. In terms of flood practice, we never mix residential schemes, flood alleviation schemes, with the wider, larger catchment area schemes. That's just good principles. It's not saying it can't be done, but we never do that. Secondly, this is an Environment Agency / Berkshire scheme, where the Environment Agency are providing funding for this. So we have to look at these schemes on their own merits and how they stack up in terms of value for money. And this scheme, in terms of flood alleviation, for the catchment and for Thatcham on the whole, is a scheme we're looking to design for the 100-year plus climate change event. The basin is designed for a 1 in 30-year event, so that's why it was never considered. Other than the complications of working with Thames Water, which is not a problem, can always be done, but as an asset, it makes it more clear, it makes the scheme in terms of the working of it a lot clearer in terms of we're designing for a 100-year climate change event within that basin. So I hope that I made that clear. We've got two distinctions. One is serving residential development. The flood alleviation scheme, which we're talking about tonight, is serving the whole catchment in that area.
Well, thank you. It's certainly clear to me. Is it clear to other members? Are there any questions? Councillor Mays.
Thank you, Chairman. Sorry, I've got the red light on. Mr. Caffrey again. Here I need a little bit of inspiration from you, because I'm working from an A4 drawing, which is very difficult to read. Can I confirm with you that the new drain running on the eastern side of the tree line comes down into the green basin at the bottom of the site, in the corner, and then the water then migrates from that green pool into the from the blue pool into the green pool, which is the area which is bunded and open-ended towards the east. Is that correct? And then the water then drains back from the same blue pool into the throttle drain in the southeastern corner. Sorry, the southwestern corner. Is that correct? Have I read it right?
If I can go through it, Councillor Mays, just to be absolutely clear. So yes, the overland flows are intercepted by the blue ditch on the eastern side of the copse or the tree line, and enters into the basin. From there, the waters flow out of the basin through a pipe, which connects back into the existing ditch that we seen on site last Wednesday. And that ditch then outfalls into a Thames Water culvert, which was needed a bit of clearance last Wednesday. And that's where the outfall from this basin discharges into the Thames Water sewer, not into the Thames Water basin, into that Thames Water sewer that's within that ditch, that existing ditch.
Yeah, from the blue area.
In the basin.
In the occasion when you have a very large flood, the 100-year plus flood, does that extra water flow into the green area between the two?
Yes.
That's correct. So that sort of trumpeted area is excess storage space.
Correct.
Okay, thank you very much.
Right, Councillor Linden.
Yes, Chairman, just to add to that, as a point of information, Stuart Clark said he's going to have that culvert part of the ditch cleared and looked after. Thank you, Chairman.
He did indeed. Any other questions? Right, questions for officers? Councillor Williamson. Oh, sorry, was that a question for Mr. Cafferty? No, officers? Right, questions for officers we are now.
I was waiting, Chair, until you said question for officers.
Well, very good. You were quick off the mark, actually. Yes. I'm struggling to keep up with you.
It's really just a point of clarification, and for the record, the point was made by Richard Asher that consultation hadn't happened with Thames Water, which certainly what I was reading in that it has happened. So I just want a clarification that consultation with Thames Water has taken place for the record, please.
Emma?
Thank you. As part of the application, we have not consulted with Thames Water. However, it's understood from the supporting information that accompanied the application that the applicant has spoken with Thames Water alongside the other stakeholders outlined in paragraph 6.5 prior to submitting the application.
We are.
Yes. But the leads, exactly. So the lead flood authority, the drainage team that put it together, it's stated within their document that consultation had happened.
Right. Councillor Macro.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Asher raised on behalf of the landowners this concern about people taking their dogs around the scheme and the dogs getting onto the farmland. There's two questions really. One is, will the public have access? And if so, will there be some kind of enclosure? Because normally on a planning application, you have a condition about enclosures, which I don't see. And I don't see anything in the plans about enclosures either. So can I have an assurance that if the public do have access, there'll be some kind of enclosure?
Emma.
So there's no public rights of way on the site at the moment. There's nothing in the proposals to suggest that's going to change. So it's not a material planning consideration. And to say the proposals themselves don't require public access. So it's not something we've considered. If the applicant wants to let people onto their land, that's obviously something. Sorry, if the landowner wants to let people on their land, that's for their choice. But it's not something within the planning application.
And Mr. Dowd. Oh, sorry.
Somebody legs it over the gate and presumably doesn't just.
Well, we walked on, didn't we, through the gap by the existing basin. Mr. Dowding, can you assist us?
Future housing estate.
No, I'm afraid I can't. I was actually hoping to be able to just ask a question of our planning officer before you went into debate, which was about conditions, because I noticed on the agenda no visibility condition is attached to this, and I haven't seen the update sheet to know if it's been added. That's all I wanted to ask.
A valid point. Emma, can you assist?
Yes, no, there isn't, Gareth, a visibility displays condition. It's not something that was requested during the consultation, but if it's something you feel is necessary, we can add it.
Yes, can it be, because we're actually going on to the A4 at that point. It's looks like it'd be a 40-mile-an-hour limit to that location as well. So I think visibility for the access is very important at that location. So I would like an additional condition added, please. I just want to make sure that was mentioned before you went into debate.
Well, that's a valid point, and as you are the highways officer, I'm sure members will have heard you and will take note. Councillor Mays.
There's just one question here, well, not really a question, an observation between the wording of the text and the conditions between one scheme and the next. There has been a fair amount of cutting and pasting, and I think we ought to check it in some detail. I have mentioned it to Emma, but I can't give her particular references to which ones I would refer to. But there is a fair amount of copying and pasting which needs to be checked.
I'm sure Emma checked it, Emma.
Yeah, the conditions have been checked, but I mean, I'm willing to look at them,
Yeah,
but I'd need
please
to know where the concern is, because I can't identify it myself.
Okay.
I think you need to be more specific. I think since these three applications are So similar, I would imagine that the wording is similar too.
Yeah, but when it's identical, then you have to be very careful.
Well, similar and possibly identical in some cases, but yes, I do take your point. We always have to be careful. Councillor Law.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. It's really a point of clarification to help me just understand the location of this one. As we've been told on many occasions at recent committees, we have to take some account and give some weight to the emerging new local plan. And the new local plan has got some implications for Siege Cross Farm. And I'm just wondering where, how close to this new basin is the proposals in the emerging local plan for the houses? Is it abut this basin, or is there planned green landscaping between it and the proposed houses? Just, I know we have to look at this and this on its own merits, but it would help me just to understand the context.
Emma, can you assist?
So the site is, as you've identified, next to lands identified as North East Thatcham. In terms of an actual layout for that scheme, nothing has actually been sort of formally agreed at this time, so I couldn't explain how close it is to whether it's open space or housing. The plan at the moment, given its early stages, is not given any weight really in the decision-making process because of it's at such an early stage of preparation. But it certainly wouldn't conflict with a residential use. But I don't think we can sort of speculate at this time.
It was just when the objective was talking about his clients being concerned about dogs coming on to grazing land.
Oh, I see.
Thinking,
yeah.
Well, is that grazing land, or is grazing land going to be housing? In
Well,
which case the concern changes, doesn't it? The context.
Yeah.
Okay, right. Thank you, Councillor Somler.
Thank you, Chairman. I just want to pick up on Councillor May's point, and I think probably the one that he's noted, if I can pick one at random, is number 5, which refers to no spoil being deposited to the north of Bowling Green roadside.
No, I realise that that's the intention to do that. That's not what I'm talking about, but there are others.
Yeah, no, I wasn't suggesting that that was the one, but it just seemed if we were talking about a different road in a different area that might not be, unless we are talking about putting spoil into different areas from the 3.
That's what my understanding. Was that right, Emma?
Yes, that's correct. That is the proposal. That any excess spoil will be deposited on those 2 areas that had been identified.
It might come from this one and go on to the other one. That's fine.
Yes, that's right. So that condition is accurate. Thank you.
Right. So we've finished questions, I think, to officers. Members, who's going to start the debate? Again, someone has to. Right. Councillor Somler.
Thank you, Chairman. I note the comments that have been made about the Thames Water point. I don't think they're relevant. I think with the added requirement of a double check on the conditions to make sure that we don't have any inappropriate referencing, which I'm quite comfortable the officers can take care of, that we move to accept officers' recommendations and the visual display that Gareth Dowling noted. Thank you.
Does that find a seconder? Oh, several, yes. Who's keeping note of that? But what one of the 3 who put their hands up all identically? Councillor Macro.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We also need to include the updated recommendation on the update sheet for the maintenance regime.
We do indeed. Thank you for that. Oh, the other hand went away. No, Councillor Mays.
It's just a comment here, Chairman. Taking spoil from this site to the other 2 would mean a fair amount of work on the road, and that is going to need the vehicles to be washed as per our conditions, but it's a point that might cause a bit of a problem in the area, especially if it's wet when they're doing the excavation work.
A valid point, actually. I don't know how much that is intended. Either Emma or Gareth Dowding, perhaps you could assist.
There is a condition 8, the construction method statement, and that does require details to be submitted prior to works, and it does specifically ask about wheel washing facilities. So it's.
I'm still concerned about it on that length. I'm still concerned about it over that length of road between Bowling Green, Wade, and the A4.
I see. Okay.
It's a long way.
Well, I think we've covered ourselves by condition 8E. Having said that, my understanding, I'm defer to my professional guidance here, is that it isn't automatic there will be spoil taken there. It's a case of if there needs to be an amount of soil. Emma, is that a reasonable summation?
Yes, it is. Yes.
Right, thank you. So do I see any other hands? Otherwise, I have a proposal which has been seconded a couple or 3 times. Those in favour, please show. Thank you, members. Again, unanimous. Right, that therefore closes the meeting. Could I just please ask you to remain seated until the recording is finished?
Chairman, if I may.
You may.
As part of the meeting.
Oh.
If I could go back and make a comment.
You may. Before, please keep us going. Yes, Councillor Law.
I don't wish to keep you going too much. Yes, I'm concerned, Chairman, about a couple of comments and decisions tonight in terms of consistency. We've had, just on this last application, officers saying we give no weight at all to the emerging local plan. And yet at the last meeting, which we consider the site of Woolhampton, the officers were arguing we should give some weight to the emerging local plan. So I just like on the record, I think we need, not tonight, but sometime soon, we need some guidance, because I'm confused and I see a number of other heads nodding on that. And the other inconsistency tonight, we were advised that it would not be appropriate to add a monitoring condition to the earlier application. Yet 3 meetings ago, we did do that. And again, we got no advice at that time to say we couldn't. In fact, I think it may have been, we were aided by 1 or 2 of the officers to do that. So again, I'd like to understand a little bit of, the rationale from a consistency point of view. Yeah, and thank you for the here's. That was all. And yeah, I wanted to go on the record and have that request minutes.
It's on the record, and I do agree that we do endeavour, we do our utmost, no less, to be consistent. And therefore, I'm sure I'm getting nods from senior officers present that comment is noted and will be followed up. Councillor Somner, do you wish to add?
Yeah, just to say, I think as portfolio holder, Chairman, I'm happy that I picked that up with officers, and we will do as we've done with other issues, we will have a chairs of planning committee meeting to take it forward, and then we can put an all-member communication out as is appropriate.
Ideal way forward, I think that's commendable. Thank you. So I'm looking around. I'm going to close the meeting. Going, closed. Please notify us, Tom.